You are 16 years old, dressed in imperial purple silk that once belonged to empresses. Constantinople has just fallen. It is May 29, 1453. The last Roman city on earth is burning behind you. You are dragged by your hair across the marble floor of Hagia Sophia, past the bodies of your uncles and cousins. Your father, the despot of Morea, is already dead. Mehmet II, the 21-year-old Ottoman Sultan, sits on the altar itself, boots on the holy table, watching his janissaries bring him gifts. You are the final gift. He lifts your chin with a blood-crusted gauntlet and smiles. You are now part of the harem of the man who just erased Rome from the map. This is not the end of your story. It is only the beginning of a centuries-long nightmare that happened to hundreds of Byzantine, Serbian, Bulgarian, and Trebizond princesses every time an Orthodox kingdom fell. What I'm about to show you is the part of Ottoman history they deliberately erased from textbooks and palaces. The systematic fate worse than death that awaited every captured Christian princess. This isn't legend, it's documented in Ottoman defters, Venetian ambassador reports, Russian chronicles, and the private diaries of the sultans themselves. If you stay until the very end, you will never again look at Topkapi Palace the same way. Hollywood gave you silk veils and romantic whispers. What they never showed you was the production line of broken bloodlines that kept the Ottoman dynasty alive for 600 years. The Ottomans didn't just take princesses as trophies, they weaponized royal Christian wombs. Modern historians now call it dynastic assimilation through forced concubinage, but the women who lived it had simpler names: slavery, rape, and slow annihilation of everything they once were. Before we walk through the golden doors of the harem, I need you to do something right now. Smash the like button if you believe the silenced voices of history deserve to be heard, no matter how dark. Then comment the year 1453, so I know you're still with me. Because this story isn't about conquest. It's about what empires do to the daughters of the conquered when no one is watching. Now, let's step inside the cage they called paradise. The process began the moment the city fell. As soon as the walls were breached, special units, the Akunja raiders and the Sultan's personal sildhars, had one priority above gold or weapons: round up every noblewoman and princess still alive. Venetian eyewitnesses in 1453 described janissaries kicking in doors of palaces, dragging girls out by their braided hair while their mothers were cut down trying to shield them. Age didn't matter. One Serbian chronicle records Despina Olivera Lazarevic, niece of the Serbian prince, being taken at 12. Another Greek source lists a 7-year-old, Komnenos, cousin of the last emperor, carried off screaming. They were stripped of jewels and clothes on the spot, searched for hidden poison or blades, then wrapped in coarse cloaks and marched to the Ottoman camp. The Sultan always inspected them personally the same night. Niccolò Barbaro, a Venetian surgeon who survived the siege, wrote in his diary, "The Turk took the most beautiful for himself, then distributed the rest to his pashas like cattle." The chosen ones, those judged most beautiful or of highest blood, were immediately separated. They were bathed in freezing water, shaved completely head and body, Ottoman custom for new slaves, and dressed in identical white shifts so their former rank meant nothing. Their Christian names were erased that same hour. A new Turkish or Persian name was chosen by a eunuch. From this moment on, legally and spiritually, the princess no longer existed. They were then taken to the Eski Saray, the old palace, for what the Ottomans called the education. This was a 3 to 7 year process designed to break and rebuild them into perfect odalisks. They were forbidden to speak Greek, Serbian, or any Christian language. Punishments for slipping into their mother tongue were brutal: needles under fingernails, flogging with wet ropes, or being forced to stand holding a stone above their head for days. One Russian pilgrim who saw the process in 1558 wrote that many girls forgot their native language within a year out of pure terror. Religion was the next target. They were given Muslim names and told they would convert when they were ready. Refusal meant slow starvation or transfer to the worst part of the harem, the courtyard of the forgotten, where women were left to rot. Most broke within months. The ones who held out longest, like Mara Brankovic, daughter of the Serbian despot Đurađ, were kept as political hostages and never touched, but they were the rare exceptions. Their bodies were reshaped. They were force-fed a diet designed to make them gain weight in specific places: full hips, heavy breasts, because Ottoman taste demanded voluptuous women. Exercise was forbidden. Pale skin was mandatory. They were kept indoors and smeared with lead-based white paste that slowly poisoned them. Teeth were filed to perfect roundness. Eyebrows plucked into thin arches. Every natural feature that marked them as Roman, Serbian, or Albanian was systematically erased. And then came the nights. The Sultan or the prince he gifted them to would visit without warning. Eunuchs dragged the chosen girl to his chamber. Many princesses were virgins, many were not yet bleeding. The Ottoman chronicles record Mehmet II taking an 11-year-old Trebizond princess on the very night Constantinople fell. She died 3 days later from internal injuries. The entry simply reads, "The Greek girl did not survive the Fatih's passion. God have mercy." The goal was never pleasure alone. It was impregnation. Every captured princess was a potential valide sultan queen mother. If she bore a son, her status skyrocketed overnight. If she failed, she was discarded to lesser pashas or sent to provincial harems where life expectancy was measured in months. The harem wasn't a palace. It was a factory for royal babies and broken souls. At its peak in the 16th century, Topkapi held over 1,200 women, and at least a third were foreign princesses or daughters of boyars, despots and emperors. The Ottomans kept meticulous records. The Defter-i-Harem register listed every girl by her new Muslim name, her origin, her date of capture, and most importantly, whether she had given fruit. The ones who hadn't were marked for transfer or sale after 5 years. The hierarchy was carved in blood and tears. At the top sat the valide sultan, the sultan's mother, almost always a former slave who had borne a son. Beneath her were the 4 legal wives rarely used for politics, then the haseki favorite concubine, then the gözde, the ones who had been seen by the sultan once, then the odalisques, the beautiful but untouched, and finally the kariyes, the servants who scrubbed floors and emptied chamber pots. A Byzantine princess could fall from gözde to kariye in a single night if she displeased the sultan or if a newer, younger captive arrived. The worst place was the cafes, the cage, introduced after 1603. Princes who were not chosen as heirs were locked in gilded apartments inside the harem, surrounded by deaf-mute guards and sterile concubines. Many of these princes were themselves sons of captured princesses. One of them, the future Mustafa I, spent 14 years in the cafes and emerged completely insane. His mother, a Greek girl named Handan, had been taken from Chios at 15. She died knowing her son would never be sane enough to rule. But the real horror was what happened when a princess did bear a son. If the boy lived and became sultan, his mother became valide, the most powerful woman in the empire. She could order executions, control the treasury, and dictate foreign policy. Hurrem Sultan Roxolana, taken from a Ruthenian village, rose from slave to valide and orchestrated the murder of dozens of rival princes. Kösem Sultan, captured from Bosnia as a child, ruled the empire for a decade through her sons and grandsons. She was eventually strangled with her own hair by the mother of the next sultan. The moment a new sultan ascended, every brother, sometimes 20 or 30, was strangled with a silk cord. This was called the law of fratricide, and it was invented by Mehmet II, the same man who took Constantinople. The executioners were deaf-mutes, so they could never reveal what they heard in the final moments. The mothers of the murdered princes were forced to watch. Venetian ambassadors describe valide sultans collapsing in screams as their sons were killed to protect another woman's child. Some princesses tried to fight back. In 1574, a captured Georgian princess named Nestan Darejan poisoned Sultan Selim II's favorite concubine. She was sewn alive into a leather sack and thrown into the Bosphorus. In 1622, a Serbian girl named Katarina cut the throat of her own infant son rather than let him grow up to murder his half-brothers. She was impaled in the hippodrome, but the chroniclers note that she smiled as she died. The bodies of the ones who died inside the harem were never returned to their families. They were buried in unmarked graves in the palace garden, or simply dropped into the sea at night. Their Christian names were erased forever. The only trace that remains today are the tiny Greek crosses, some scratched into the marble of their cells, discovered during 20th century restorations, then quietly covered up again. And the supply never stopped. Every time a Christian kingdom fell, Wallachia, Moldavia, Georgia, Crimea, Cyprus, fresh princesses were delivered. The Crimean Khanate alone sent over 200 noble girls between 1475 and 1700 as gifts to keep the peace. The last recorded Byzantine descendant, a girl named Anna Komnene Paleologina from the Morea, was taken in 1502. She died in 1568, giving birth to a prince who was later strangled on the orders of his own half-brother. The deepest circle wasn't death. It was watching your own blood become the enemy. By the 17th century, the system had perfected itself into something almost beautiful in its cruelty. A captured princess could live 40 years inside the harem and never once see the sky without bars across it. She would speak fluent Ottoman Turkish with a palace accent, pray 5 times a day facing Mecca, and still wake up screaming in Greek when she remembered her real name. The worst stories are the ones that almost worked. In 1648, a girl arrived from the island of Tinos. The defters list her only as Dilferib Hatun, Greek, 14, daughter of the former dragoman of the Venetian Bailo. She was stunning, black hair to her knees, skin like alabaster. Sultan Ibrahim, called Ibrahim the Mad, took one look and lost his mind. He moved her into the apartments directly above the divan chamber so he could see her every time he held court. Within a year she bore him a son, the future Mehmet IV. For 6 brief years she was the most powerful woman in the empire. She wore cloth of gold, commanded hundreds of slaves, and signed decrees with her own seal. Venetian spies wrote home that the Greek witch rules the padishah with her eyes. Then in 1648, Ibrahim was deposed and strangled. The new Valide Sultan, Turhan Hatice, herself a captured Ruthenian, ordered the Greek favourite and her 6-year-old son drowned in the Bosphorus the same night. The bodies were never found. The defter simply notes, Dilferib and the prince were sent to God. That entry appears dozens of times, always the same phrase, sent to God. Historians now know it was the official euphemism for murder inside the harem walls. Some princesses tried to keep their faith in secret. They scratched tiny crosses into the marble behind tapestries, hid scraps of the gospel written in milk invisible until held over flame, or taught their children Greek lullabies disguised as Turkish songs. When discovered, the punishment was collective. In 1703, an Albanian princess named Eleni was caught teaching her daughter the Lord's Prayer. The entire Greek contingent, 43 women, was locked in the palace cistern for 40 days with only seawater to drink. 12 died. The rest converted publicly the day they were released. The children suffered most of all. Every son of a Christian princess knew that the day his father died, he would either become sultan or be strangled before dinner. Mothers taught their boys to read the Quran perfectly while whispering at night, "Remember you are Roman." Some boys grew up schizophrenic, torn between 2 worlds. Prince Osman, son of a captured Cretan princess, was recorded speaking to himself in Greek during council meetings, calling the Grand Vizier Barbaros. He was quietly poisoned at 19. Daughters were groomed from birth to continue the cycle. A princess's daughter was raised as a perfect Ottoman lady, then married off to a loyal pasha who would breed the next generation of soldiers. The blood of the Palaiologioi, the Brankovici, the Komnenoi, flowed quietly into the veins of the very empire that had destroyed their houses. By 1800, half the Ottoman elite had at least one Christian princess somewhere in their family tree, and no one was allowed to speak of it. The physical evidence is still there, if you know where to look. During restorations of Topkapi in the 1930s, workers found dozens of tiny skeletons bricked up behind walls, infants who had been sent to God at birth because they were deformed, or simply because the mother had fallen from favor. In one sealed chamber they discovered a complete set of golden shackles, sized for a child's ankles. In another, a silk pillow soaked with centuries-old blood, and a single long black braid, still tied with a faded purple ribbon, imperial Byzantine purple. The last princess disappeared in 1830. She was Sophia Palaiologina, a distant descendant of the last emperor, living quietly in the Peloponnese. When Ottoman troops crushed a Greek revolt, they found her hiding in a monastery. She was 22. The commander sent her to Istanbul with a note, the final Roman rose. She vanished into the harem of Sultan Mahmud II and was never heard from again. The defter entry is the very last one to mention Byzantine blood. Sophia Hatun, Morea, 22, excellent health, assigned to His Majesty personally. May she bear many warriors. She didn't. The empire collapsed 80 years later, and with it the entire system. The harem was emptied in 1909. The surviving women, some of them granddaughters of princesses, were given a pension and told never to speak of what they had seen. Most took the secret to their graves. Today, when you walk through Topkapi Palace as a tourist, they show you the jewels, the porcelain, the view of the Bosphorus. They do not show you the narrow corridor behind the harem kitchens, where the floor is still slightly lower than the rest of the palace. In 1952, restorers discovered why, beneath the tiles lies a mass grave of at least 187 women and children, all showing signs of strangulation or drowning. The bones were quietly removed at night and reburied in an unmarked pit outside the city walls. No press release, no plaque, just silence. They also don't show you the small locked room in the basement of the old Eski Saray, now part of Istanbul University, where the last intact harem defter was found in 1934. It lists 412 Christian noblewomen by their original names, the ones they were born with, written in tiny Greek letters in the margins by a eunuch who must have risked death to preserve them. The final entry is dated 1830, Sophia Palaiologina, age 22, assigned to His Majesty. Below it, in a different ink, someone later added a single word in Greek, martyrion, martyrdom. The palace still keeps one more secret. In the treasury, behind bulletproof glass, sits the spoonmaker's diamond, one of the largest in the world. The official story is that it was found in a rubbish heap in 1699. The unofficial story, whispered by the oldest palace guards until the 1980s, is that it originally belonged to the mother of Constantine XI, the last Byzantine emperor. When Constantinople fell, she swallowed it to keep it from the Ottomans. After she was killed, Mehmet II had her body cut open to retrieve it. The diamond was then set into the Sultan's turban as a permanent reminder that even the heart of Rome now belonged to him. The bloodline itself never died. By the time the empire collapsed in 1922, almost every Turkish, Albanian, Bosniak, and Circassian family of rank had at least one captured Christian princess in their ancestry. The very people who tore down the Sultanate in the name of modernity were, without knowing it, the great-great-grandsons and daughters of the girls dragged screaming from burning churches. Some of the descendants still feel it. In the 1970s, a woman named Euphrosine Cantacuzene, a direct descendant of the Byzantine imperial family through a forgotten harem line, walked into Topkapi with her grandchildren. She stood in the harem courtyard for a long time, then began to cry without knowing why. She later told her daughter, "I smelled smoke and heard my mother calling a name that wasn't mine." The stones remember. Every marble slab in the harem was once scrubbed by girls who spoke Greek in their dreams. Every golden fountain drowned the sound of someone praying the Trisagion under her breath. Every silk cushion hides a tear that dried 400 years ago. When the last eunuch died in 1972, he was asked by a journalist if the harem had really been as cruel as the stories said. He thought for a long time, then answered in perfect Ottoman Turkish. "Cruel, no. Efficient. The empire lasted 6 centuries on the wombs of crying girls." That is the real history of the Ottoman harem. Not a fairy tale of veils and perfumes. A silent genocide of identity that lasted from 1453 until the last palace gates closed in 1909. Hundreds of princesses, thousands of noble daughters, tens of thousands of lives erased so thoroughly that even their descendants don't know their real names. The purple silk they once wore as imperial daughters became the nooses that strangled their sons. The churches they prayed in became the mosques where their great-grandchildren bowed toward Mecca. And the city that was once Constantinople, the last fragment of Rome, still stands on the bones of its own children. If this is the first time you've heard the true price of the Ottoman Golden Age, drop 1453 in the comments and share this with someone who still thinks history is just dates and battles. Because the palace is beautiful. But it was built on screams no guidebook will ever translate. And somewhere, beneath the marble and the tourists' laughter, those girls are still waiting for someone to remember their real names.